Hello. You have stumbled upon a new contribution to the online world of George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. The purpose here is to discuss theories, ideas, predictions about the books in the series and to a lesser extent the HBO series. I also recommend, for continuing reference, the audiobook versions read for us by the ever excellent Roy Dotrice. This first contribution will be about a couple chapters in the fifth book, A Dance with Dragons. If you have not yet read the first 5 books or seen the first 5 seasons of the HBO series, you'll probably want to come back when you have, so I'm not spoiling any story element for you. There is something I've detected in George R.R. Martin's books that I think is a brilliant way of what I would call bookending a story. I could also describe it as dovetailing the final and first chapter in a book to complete a story cycle. In the prologue for A Dance with Dragons, we get the story of a wildling known as Varamir Sixskins. As you may know, the wildlings are the people who live north of the Wall. They call themselves the Free Folk. People south of the Wall call them wildlings. I would describe Varamir Sixskins as a professional skin changer. He's been through several lives, apparently, with different creatures. We've seen Bran enter the body of Hodor, but Bran and Hodor have already known each other for all of Bran's life. And Hodor is one of Bran's caretakers, a primary caretaker, in fact, especially after Bran has lost use of his legs. So we're introduced to the story, a day in the life, the last day, in fact, in the life of Varamir Sixskins. Now we get to see a lot here. We see a skin changer's point of view on the outside world as the dead, animated by the White Walkers, overrun a village that's almost completely been destroyed already, probably because of Mance Rayder's war at the Wall. But we also see the dead, animated by the White Walkers, overrun this village. We also get a quick glimpse in on Bran, Jojen, and Mira riding on Cold Hand's elk. But this is primarily a mini-story on Varamir.
Varamir woke suddenly, violently, his whole body shaking. "Get up!" A voice was screaming. "Get up! We have to go! There are hundreds of them!" The snow had covered him with a stiff white blanket. So cold! When he tried to move, he found that his hand was frozen to the ground. He left some skin behind when he tore it loose. "Get up!" she screamed again. "They're coming!" Thistle had returned to him. She had him by the shoulders, and she was shaking him, shouting in his face. Varamir could smell her breath and feel the warmth of it upon cheeks gone numb with cold. "No," he thought. "Do it now, or die." He summoned all the strength still in him, leapt out of his own skin, and forced himself inside her. Thistle arched her back and screamed, "Abomination!" Was that her, or him, or Hagen? He never knew. His old flesh fell back into the snowdrift as her fingers loosened. The spear wife twisted violently, shrieking. His shadow cat used to fight him wildly, and the snow bear had gone half mad for a time, snapping at trees and rocks and empty air. But this was worse. "Get out! Get out!" He heard her own mouth shouting. Her body staggered, fell, and rose again. Her hands flailed, her legs jerked this way and that in some grotesque dance, as his spirit and her own fought for the flesh. She sucked down a mouthful of the frigid air, and Varamir had half a heartbeat to glory in the taste of it and the strength of this young body before her teeth snapped together and filled his mouth with blood. She raised her hands to his face. He tried to push them down again, but the hands would not obey, and she was clawing at his eyes. Abomination, he remembered, drowning in blood and pain and madness. When he tried to scream, she spat their tongue out. The white world turned and fell away. For a moment, it was as if he were inside the weirwood, gazing out through carved red eyes as a dying man twitched feebly on the ground and a mad woman danced, blind and bloody, underneath the moon, weeping red tears and ripping at her clothes. When both were gone, and he was rising, melting, his spirit borne on some cold wind. He was in the snow and in the clouds. He was a sparrow, a squirrel, an oak. A horned owl flew silently between his trees, hunting a hare. Varamir was inside the owl, inside the hare, inside the trees. Deep below the frozen ground, earthworms burrowed blindly in the dark, and he was them as well. I am the wood and everything that's in it, he thought, exulting. 100 ravens took to the air, cawing as they felt him pass. A great elk trumpeted, unsettling the children clinging to his back. A sleeping direwolf raised his head to snarl at empty air. Before their hearts could beat again, he had passed on, searching for his own, for One-Eye, Sly, and Stalker, for Pack. His wolves would save him, he told himself. That was his last thought as a man. True death came suddenly. He felt a shock of cold, as if he had been plunged into the icy waters of a frozen lake. Then he found himself rushing over moonlit snows with his packmates close behind him. Half the world was dark. One-Eye he knew. He bayed, and Sly and Stalker gave echo. When they reached the crest, the wolves paused. Thistle, he remembered, and a part of him grieved for what he had lost, and another part for what he'd done. Below, the world had turned to ice. Fingers of frost crept slowly up the weirwood, reaching out for each other. The empty village was no longer empty. Blue-eyed shadows walked amongst the mounds of snow. Some wore brown and some wore black, and some were naked, their flesh gone white as snow. A wind was sighing through the hills, heavy with their scents. Dead flesh, dry blood, skins that stank of mold, and rot and urine. Sly gave a growl and bared her teeth, her ruff bristling. Not men, not prey, not these. The things below moved, but did not live. One by one they raised their heads toward the 3 wolves on the hill. The last to look was the thing that had been Thistle. She wore wool and fur and leather, and over that she wore a coat of hoarfrost that crackled when she moved and glistened in the moonlight. Pale pink icicles hung from her fingertips, 10 long knives of frozen blood. And in the pits where her eyes had been, a pale blue light was flickering, lending her coarse features an eerie beauty they had never known in life. Oh, she sees me.
I think Varamir is being tested by the old gods. He's already been wounded, but if you notice, he sort of hobbles towards a weirwood tree, and he just happens to find a stick fallen that is the perfect size for a cane. But then the first thing he does once he gets the cane is to contemplate looting another tent or hovel, and then the cane breaks almost immediately. So I think he has been tested here by the old gods and been found wanting. And then, as if that's not failure enough, a woman named Thistle shows up. She had gone for help and has now returned for him. She has not been able to find help, but she has at least come back herself to try to help him out of the village in front of the dead, who are now overrunning the place. The way this is described is quite violent and disconcerting. To me, it sounds like a rape. He tries to leap into her body, and rather than let him take over her body, she claws out her own eyes and then bites off and spits out her own tongue. He is pretty quickly forced out, and as you see him rise above the scene, he looks back and sees her now dead body with the blue eyes, the empty blue light that we have seen in the story before. Now, I believe this is setting up the more familiar story from the end of the book involving the death of Jon Snow, which was obviously portrayed in the HBO series. Now, I have looked online across YouTube and other places to try to find videos by other people or podcasts by other people who have noticed this and have commented on this aspect of the story. So far, I haven't seen anybody, including the producers of the TV show. It's possible that it's a little extraneous to the story, and if it doesn't drive the story forward, they may have left this out intentionally. If it does not get us to the end of the story, then it may be seen as unnecessary and therefore left out. And besides, having direct access to George R.R. Martin, it seems more likely that they would leave it out on purpose than by mistake. That being said, I've never made a TV show. There may be considerations that I would never be able to consider. Much more importantly, I consider it a good chance that I might be wrong about all of this. So, chapter 69 of A Dance with Dragons. This is a point of view chapter for Jon. This is also the chapter in which he gets the famous or infamous pink letter, which is another popular topic of discussion, but not this discussion. Keep in mind the idea of bookending or dovetailing the beginning and the end, and the theme of skin changing. Earlier in the chapter, the skin changer Baroque shows up with his giant boar. It may be that most other people here at Castle Black, at least people from the south of the Wall, may not be aware that Baroque is a skin changer. But we have heard of him from the Prologue and maybe one other place in A Dance with Dragons if memory serves. In any case, the boar should be a clue.
I summoned you to make plans for the relief of Hardhome, Jon Snow began. Thousands of the free folk are gathered there, trapped and starving, and we've had reports of dead things in the wood. To his left he saw Marsh and Yarvik. The Thel was surrounded by his builders, whilst Bowen had Wicklestick, Left-Hand Lou, and Alf of Runnymud beside him. To his right, Thorin Shieldbreaker sat with his arms crossed against his chest. Farther back, Jon saw Gavin the trader and Harl the handsome whispering together. Egon Oldfather sat amongst his wives, Howd Wanderer alone. Boric leaned against a wall in a dark corner. Mercifully, his boar was nowhere in evidence. The ships I sent to take off Mother Mole and her people have been wrecked by storms. We must send what help we can by land or let them die. 2 of Queen Salisa's knights had come as well, Jon saw. Sir Narbet and Sir Benethan stood near the door at the foot of the hall, but the rest of the Queen's men were conspicuous in their absence. I had hoped to lead the ranging myself and bring back as many of the free folk as could survive the journey. A flash of red in the back of the hall caught Jon's eye. Lady Melisandre had arrived. But now I find I cannot go to Hardhome. The ranging will be led by Tormund Giantsbane, known to you all. I have promised him as many men as he requires. And where will you be, Crow? Boric thundered. Hide in here, in Castle Black, with your white dog? No, I ride south. Then Jon read them the letter Ramsay Snow had written. The Shield Hall went mad. Every man began to shout at once. They leapt to their feet, shaking fists. So much for the calming power of comfortable benches. Swords were brandished, axes smashed against shields. Jon Snow looked to Tormund. The Giantsbane sounded his horn once more, twice as long and twice as loud as the first time. The Night's Watch takes no part in the wars of the Seven Kingdoms, Jon reminded them, when some semblance of quiet had returned. It is not for us to oppose the bastard of Bolton, to avenge Stannis Baratheon, to defend his widow and his daughter. This creature, who makes cloaks from the skins of women, had sworn to cut my heart out, and I mean to make him answer for those words. But I will not ask my brothers to forswear their vows. The Night's Watch will make for Hardhome. I ride to Winterfell alone, unless... Jon paused. Is there any man here who will come stand with me? The roar was all he could have hoped for. The tumult so loud that 2 old shields tumbled from the walls. Sorin Shieldbreaker was on his feet, the Wanderer as well. Torrig the Tall, Brog, Hal the Huntsman, and Hal the Handsome both. Egon Oldfather, Blind Doss, even the Great Walrus. I have my swords, thought Jon Snow, and we are coming for you, bastard. Yarwick and Marsh were slipping out, he saw, and all their men behind them. It made no matter. He did not need them now, he did not want them. No man can ever say, I made my brothers break their vows. If this is oath-breaking, the crime is mine, and mine alone. Then Tormund was pounding him on the back, all gap-toothed grin from ear to ear. Well spoken, Crow. Now bring out the mead. Make them yours and get them drunk. That's how it's done. We'll make a wildling of you yet, boy. Ha! I will send for ale, Jon said, distracted. Melisandre was gone, he realized, and so were the Queen's knights. I should have gone to Selyse first. She has the right to know her lord is dead. You must excuse me. I'll leave you to get them drunk. Ha! A task I'm well suited for, Crow. On your way. Horse and Rory fell in beside Jon as he left the shield hall. I should talk with Melisandre after I see the Queen, he thought. If she could see a raven in a storm, she can find Ramsay Snow for me. Then he heard the shouting, and a roar so loud it seemed to shake the wall. That come from Harden's Tower, my lord, Horse reported. He might have said more, but the scream cut him off. Val, was Jon's first thought. But that was no woman's scream. That is a man in mortal agony. He broke into a run. Horse and Rory raced after him. Is it Whites? Asked Rory. Jon wondered. Could his corpses have escaped their chains? The screaming had stopped by the time they came to Harden's Tower, but One-Weg Wonder-One was still roaring. The giant was dangling a bloody corpse by one leg, the same way Arya used to dangle her doll when she was small, swinging it like a morning star when menaced by vegetables. Arya never tore her doll to pieces, though. The dead man's sword arm was yards away, the snow beneath it turning red. Let him go, Jon shouted. One-One, let him go. One-One did not hear or did not understand. The giant was bleeding himself, with sword cuts on his belly and his arm. He swung the dead knight against the grey stone of the tower, again and again and again, until the man's head was red and pulpy as summer melon. The knight's cloak flapped in the cold air. Of white wool it had been, bordered in cloth of silver and patterned with blue stars. Blood and bone were flying everywhere. Men poured from the surrounding keeps and towers. Northmen, freemen, Queensmen. Form a line, Jon Snow commanded them. Keep them back, everyone, but especially the Queen's men. The dead man was Sir Patrick of King's Mountain. His head was largely gone, but his heraldry was as distinctive as his face. Jon did not want to risk Sir Melagorn or Sir Bruss or any of the Queen's other knights trying to avenge him. One-Weg Wonder-One howled again and gave Sir Patrick's other arm a twist and pull. It tore loose from his shoulder with a spray of bright red blood. Like a child pulling petals off a daisy, thought Jon. Let us talk to him, calm him. The old tongue, he understands the old tongue. Keep back, the rest of you. Put away your steel. We're scaring him. Couldn't they see the giant had been cut? Jon had to put an end to this, or more men would die. They had no idea of One-One's strength. A horn, I need a horn. He saw the glint of steel, turned toward it. No blades, he screamed. Wick, put that knife away, he meant to say. When Wick Whittlestick slashed at his throat, the word turned into a grunt. Jon twisted from the knife, just enough so it barely grazed his skin. He cut me. When he put his hand to the side of his neck, blood welled between his fingers. Why? For the watch. Wick slashed at him again. This time, John caught his wrist and bent his arm back until he dropped the dagger. The gangling steward backed away, his hands upraised as if to say, "Not me, it was not me." Men were screaming. John reached for Longclaw, but his fingers had grown stiff and clumsy. Somehow he could not seem to get the sword free of its scabbard. Then Bowen Marsh stood there before him, tears running down his cheeks. "For the watch!" He punched John in the belly. When he pulled his hand away, the dagger stayed where he had buried it. John fell to his knees. He found the dagger's hilt and wrenched it free. In the cold night air, the wound was smoking. "Ghost," he whispered. Pain washed over him. "Stick them with a pointy end." When the third dagger took him between the shoulder blades, he gave a grunt and fell face first into the snow. He never felt the fourth knife, only the cold.
Right away, it seemed to me that Burrough was showing up here as a challenge to John, with his giant boar as a foil against Ghost. The plan was that John was going to Hardhome to rescue a big group of the free folk who were following a woods witch known as Mother Mole. In the HBO series, we actually did see John go to Hardhome, but that hasn't happened in the book. In the book, John receives the pink letter, which we also have not seen in the HBO series, and he decides at the last minute to head for Winterfell to confront Ramsay, who ostensibly wrote the pink letter, though I think most serious readers of the books don't buy that. Again, I think what we're actually seeing here involves the theme of skin changing and invading the bodies of others. The key is when Wick seems to be saying, "It's not me." I think that the Brothers of the Night's Watch were not willingly killing John. What I think is that Burrough had been planning something for John somewhere north of the Wall on the way to Hardhome. But when, at the last minute, at the Shield Hall, John changed his plans and decided to go south to Winterfell, instead, Burrough had to go ahead and act quickly. Ghost and the boar were both locked up. So what we're seeing is that if it's not Burrough, another, perhaps a more powerful skin changer, is using the already tense situation between the different factions at Castle Black to kill John. It looks like first, the Knight was invaded and compelled to attack 1-1. Then obviously 1-1 would retaliate and kill the Knight. Second, the skin changer invades 1-1's body. 1-1 would really be confused now, and it would perhaps be so much easier to manipulate 1-1 into reacting even more violently. And then third, John shows up and tries to intervene, so the skin changer leaps into Wick, stabs John, shouts "For the Watch," and then fourth, leaps into Bowen Marsh, and again shouts "For the Watch." Maybe with John's dying word, Ghost, he is wishing Ghost were here. Maybe he's reaching out to Ghost to try to slip into his body, like we saw Orell slip into an eagle and then attack John. Obviously, Burrough seems to be the only skin changer present, and here might be the weak point of my theory/prediction. Burrough is a skin changer, but is he powerful enough to do this with 1-1, even invading them for a few seconds? This is the question that was raised to me by the other Song of Ice and Fire YouTube producer. If Burrough is not the skin changer who did this, then either there is a more powerful skin changer present, or I'm just plain wrong. One more quick topic. I don't think this is topical enough to do a whole video discussion, so I'm going to tag it on the end here. And since we have John already, I'm going to bring this up. His famous first lesson in swordplay for Arya was stick them with the pointy end. I have to think that George, being a student of medieval history, may already know this, but did you? Swords do have a sharp or pointy side, but that's not the only business end of a sword. They also have a pommel, and in the modern world I think we forget this, though we do still have in our current vocabulary the word pommel, meaning to strike or bludgeon somebody. And notice the pommel on a sword can look a lot like a hammer, and should have an equal balance of weight. And if you're in a sword fight, perhaps wearing heavy leather or armored gauntlets, another legitimate and I would say a noticeable way to hit somebody is with the other end, the pommel. And even if they're wearing a helmet, you'd still be able to ring their bell. And we know, in our modern world, that concussions are not uncommon, even with modern protective headgear. So do you think there's a chance we'll see some pommeling in The Winds of Winter or Dreams of Spring?
Well, okay. Wow, that was it. Thanks for listening to the historic world's first ever internet cast done by me. It was a lot of fun to make, and I hope it was fun for you to listen to. If you're listening via podcast, I hear iTunes reviews are helpful. If you're on a YouTube-ized version of this, then hit the like, subscribe even. Either way, tell your friends, anyone else you think might enjoy this. And for now, good luck, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, as the case may be.